Welcome to the Dirty Side of Leadership podcast with Ron and Kristin, where leadership meets entertainment. This podcast features stories with names and certain aspects that have been changed to keep submissions private. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Dirty Side of Leadership podcast, where leadership meets entertainment. I'm Kristin Sokoloff, and as always, joined by my co-host, Ronnie Ward. Today, we are unpacking a global headline with deep leadership implications. The arrest of Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro. His arrest wasn't just a political moment. It was a high-risk, high-precision operation that required extraordinary planning, intelligence coordination, discipline, and leadership at the highest levels.
That's right, Kristin. And to help us understand what this kind of mission actually takes and what leaders everywhere can learn from it, we are joined by Colonel C.J. Williams, United States Marine Corps, retired.
Yes. Colonel Williams spent over 32 years as an infantry officer, commanding at every level from platoon to regiment. The multiple combat deployments and senior strategic leadership roles are going to help this conversation come to life. His abbreviated bio will be in the show notes. Colonel Williams, welcome to the Dirty Side of Leadership.
Thank you, Kristin and Ron. It's a joy to be here. I'm excited about this. I know Ron, he asked me to do this over the holidays, and I'm all about it. Sharing this information with people that just don't know what's behind the scenes, right, and what it actually takes to pull off a mission like that. It's an enormous amount of coordination, and I know that we'll get into that. But thank you so much for having me on this morning, and I look forward to the conversation.
We are honored to have you here, and it's going to be a great experience for audience members because they get to hear it, I hate to say dumbed down, but where you're going to explain it for the general population to the best of your abilities. I know that's hard, but I want to just start with when news broke about Maduro's arrest, what stood out to you first, not politically necessarily, but operationally, as someone who truly understands complex missions at the highest level?
Well, I as soon as I saw it, and obviously this would have been a classified operation at the top secret compartmentalized TSSCI level, so nobody would have known about this unless you're directly involved. There are service members and other government agency members who were involved in this who wouldn't have known what was going on either. It's that classified, right? And so I only think when those things happen at the operational level. The political stuff, I got it. Right? I can watch the news, okay?
Yeah.
But I get that. But I go right to the heart of, if you have any idea, and I try to explain to my wife, any idea how complex what they just did is. Yeah. And the fact that they pulled it off, and there were 7 people wounded, and I don't like that at all, but no one was killed, and they're on the ground for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
It is insanely complex. I will do my best, Kristin, to lift the veil on what goes on behind the scenes.
Oh yeah, that's going to be difficult, but right, because it's just so much. But we really appreciate you.
Yeah, and in that vein, Colonel, many people see the outcome, but not the machinery behind it. Can you walk us through the level of planning, intelligence coordination, and precision required to successfully detain a sitting head of state?
So you said that this podcast is a month long?
You're like...
It's a great question, Ron. Thank you.
Do your damnedest.
And I'll kind of delete the sitting head of state. I know it is a sitting head of state, and that does add a level of complexity in a legal perspective. But we've done numerous of these for terrorists around the world to go in and kill or capture them and bring them to justice, right? I was responsible. I was the J-33, which is the Director of Current Operations for United States Africa Command in Stuttgart, Germany. And I'll tell you, there's always a crisis in Africa. It's rarely in the news, but there's 53 countries that we're responsible for, and there's always a crisis in Africa. Wow. So most of it revolves around transnational fundamentalist Islamic terrorism. So we would go in there with different units and try to extract them from their influence over operations worldwide. The level of planning, to your point, Ron, and I was going to outline this a little bit later, but I listed on a piece of scrap paper here all of the agencies that would have been involved in this.
Let's hear it.
All right, I'll tell you this. So you've got POTUS, obviously, the National Command Authority. Okay? President of the United States, POTUS, sorry. You have the National Security Council, Department of Defense, Department of Justice, Department of State, certainly, the Joint Staff, the CIA, DIA, Defense Intelligence, NSA, National Security Agency, Southcom, Northcom, Special Operations Command, Cybercom, Spacecom, Stratcom, Joint Forces Command, all of the service components from every service, from Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Spacecom, Coast Guard would have been involved in this as well. Then you put Army assets on a naval vessel, which is not common. It's not unheard of, but it's not common. So you had to learn and plan how to integrate an Army force into a naval vessel. That's not easy. And then you have Delta Force, Rangers. I'll talk about them later. That came from 20 bases and 150 different type model series aircraft, from tankers to surveillance aircraft to attack fighters, clearly, since you saw the kinetic effects of them. So all of those levels, that's 25 levels of agency, or 25 separate agencies or services and service components that are involved. It actually gets more complex because each combatant command has a service component from each of the services in their headquarters. So who's actually pulling off the mission, you have to coordinate with your service headquarters in the Pentagon, with the component commanders for each of those combatant commands that I mentioned, which is 7 combatant commands.
Are those folks sitting in the war room? Is that like this type of a scenario like we see in the movies, right? Is that
absolutely
okay?
I can only speak for Africa Command. I don't know what the particular name for the other combatant commands is, but they're all the same. Yeah. Ours was the Senior Decision Center.
Okay.
And you have the 4-star combatant commander, right? And then you have all of his generals and admirals that are around the table. And I was usually the guy briefing the operation to them and taking their direction and guidance and trying to modify them. Something that this complex would have taken, and you've seen it in the news, it would have taken months to coordinate this.
Okay. Okay.
Just think about 150 aircraft from 20 different bases taking off at the same time. Tankers have to go first, right? Because they have to refuel in air at night.
Yeah.
Right? So there are an insane amount of moving pieces to this, and the fact that we did it and suffered minimal casualties is a testimony to. And I asked Lynn, my wife, how many militaries in the world do you think could have pulled this off?
Oh my goodness.
And she said, 1.
Right.
And she's right, us.
Yeah.
We are the only one that could pull that off, and I'm kind of proud of that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think anyone that's a patriot's proud of this, and
yes.
and you and I had talked before. We don't think in history there's been anything just like this. In other words, like you said, we've toppled governments, we've seen leaders flee, leaders have been killed, but I don't think we've kidnapped a leader. Am I correct on that?
No, of course we did. Noriega, captured him and his wife's shoes, and then in Africa we helped move some leaders along.
Was his wife Imelda Marcos? Oh yeah. Oh my gosh, my mom had a book about her shoes.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh, yes.
That didn't end well for them. But no, Ron, just from my memory, I can't think of another sitting sovereign leader or leader of a sovereign country that we've gone in and extracted like that. Yeah. I could totally be wrong on that.
I get it.
Yeah,
so
incredibly rare, I guess we could say confidently.
Yeah. True, Kristin. True.
This kind of operation leaves no room for improvisation, but I guess maybe you have to it sometimes. But how critical are discipline, rehearsals, and command clarity in preventing mission failure?
There's a mixed answer to that. Okay, it's incredibly imperative, right? The individual actions of the people who are actually flying the aircraft or flying the tankers or on the ground, boots on the ground, we call it BOG, that are actually doing that, they rehearse so often and so much to a level of precision that's eye-watering to watch them. It's almost a muscle memory by the time they get on the ground. That said, I'd like to add that as a commander, the worst thing that I could have done was tell them exactly how to do it. right? My job was to set the conditions for them to be successful. Not, you work off of intent. The more senior you get, you work off of intent. This is what I see in the end. I always start with the end, right? Start with the end state. This is what I see in the end. I would tell my Marines, I will tell you what, but I will never tell you how. Okay? Because you have to have a level of spontaneity or improvisation on the ground, because the person who's in the White House Situation Room, or the 4-star that's sitting at Southern Command, they can't direct what's going on the ground because they're not on the ground, right? And there's a great phrase that we always use, and that is, the enemy gets a vote. Right? So no matter how much you plan this thing to a T, no matter how spot on the intel was, like the Osama bin Laden raid, right? We crashed a helicopter. Who saw that coming, right? And so they had to improvise on the ground. And if you empower your people, the closer they get to the trigger pullers, to be empowered with improvisation, you'll ensure your intent. But the Pentagon doesn't have any 1,000-mile screwdrivers. Okay, so they can't fix your problem in Venezuela from the Pentagon. Just put it that way.
Right. There was just an episode I was watching last night, and it was Seinfeld, believe it or not, but he had an assistant, and she was asking him how to do every single thing, and he basically was like, you need to be able to make some decisions on your own, right? And it's so true, because there are people like that I've had them work for me before, where, what do you want me to do for this? What do you want me to do for this? And it is incredibly important, to your point, CJ, that you need to give them the autonomy to think on their own, because you're not always going to be right there in their ear, and they need to be able to use their expertise and make those split-second decisions. I love that part of the message. It really resonates with me, and it should resonate with everyone listening.
I saw it. It really was my role. Speaking truth to power is really important, okay? Because your responsibility, your positional authority, your positional responsibility, I always saw as sacrosanct to that, to tell the boss, whomever that was, the truth. Because I'll give you a great example. During Benghazi, and I was the director of current operations for that whole operation, I had an admiral, and I won't say who, but an admiral, and he would ask me questions constantly. Hey, what's going on with this? And I would say, sir, I can find that out.
Yeah.
What's going on with that? Because it's 5 layers below the combatant command, and that'll take about 6 hours to do, right, for it to go from one command to the other, and then it'll come back up here, and I'll give you the answer. And what are you going to do with that information? Like, what decision or action are you going to take based on that trivial question you just asked? And
would you ask him that?
Every time.
Oh, good for you. Wow. I like you even more.
If you ask me a question, but you can do nothing with the answer, stop asking me questions.
Yes.
I think,
because I actually have work to do.
I think that's a great business takeaway for us.
Yes.
And CJ, you mentioned something, and we had this happen all the time in federal law enforcement. It's contingencies. When you go in and say you're searching a home, whatever you're doing, it's like Mike Tyson said, everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face. And I like, it is true. And I like what you said, because these guys are so fine-tuned. They know each other so well, or at least certain units do. I know we had some joint, I guess, task force, for lack of a better word, working together. But they can, this is the beauty of the U.S. military, they can change and adapt in a second, I assume, and I'm sure they had to do some of that in this particular mission.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
They most certainly did. I wasn't there, okay, but I will tell you with 100% certainty that they had to flex on the ground. Okay, they had to flex in the air. They had to flex in the headquarters across North America and South America. They had to flex in Cuba. They had to flex at sea in the Iwo Jima and the Gerald R. Ford that were out there, and the number of ships it takes to support those. They had to flex. Because if you remember, I'm certain you do, we were able to pull this off because there was a quick break in the weather over Venezuela that allowed us visibility to go in there and do what we needed to do.
Wow.
What if that weather closed really quickly? Weather gets a vote too, right?
Yeah.
And then you need to be able to flex on the ground. So what you want to do as a commander, the more senior you get, is you want to see your Marines or soldiers, whatever service it is, in my case Marines, you want to see them use implicit communications. Okay, like I don't need to say anything. We've done this so many times together, and we've been in situations where we had to flex or improvise or pivot so many times that I know what you're thinking, and I'm going to just do it. Nobody needs to tell me. I'm just going to go do it. Okay, implicit communications is the key when you talk about the tactical level of this operation.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you know what I love about that is that scales to anyone even just working in an office, right? So it's incredibly important everywhere. Obviously, the outcome is going to be more severe in the scenarios you've been part of, but people fail all over the board with this.
Sure they do. But if you have clear intent and you provide the resource, command is really a metaphor. The word command is a metaphor for resource provider, right? Intent is a resource. Guidance is a resource. Tanks are a resource. Aircraft are a resource. Your job as the commander is to provide them and set the conditions where they will be successful because they have the right resources at hand.
Love it.
It's not to be in the cockpit telling the guy, "Hey, turn right." That's control. That's totally different.
Okay.
I have an LLC with a buddy of mine who was a Marine colonel, retired. And we were commissioned the same day and retired the same day. We've been golf partners for 35 years.
Love
and
it.
He's one of my dearest friends. And the business is called TMCW Consulting, which stands for the Marine Corps Way Consulting. And last month, Morgan Stanley called me and said, "Hey, will you come? We're bringing in 100 CEOs. This is to your point, Kristin, because you're exactly right.
Yeah.
We're bringing in 100 CEOs from around the world. They're all tech and pharma. Will you come be and give the keynote address at our banquet the night before the conference starts?" And I'm like, "Of course I will. Love to." Right? And I was asked by somebody, "Well, yeah, but you're a Marine. These are tech CEOs and pharma CEOs." Like, leadership's leadership.
Exactly.
I've been writing a book for a long time. The outline's over there, but the title of it is "The Answer's Leadership. What's your question?"
Yes. Oh, I love this.
So I talked to those CEOs and just gave them some pragmatic things that they can do to connect with their people. If you connect, they will perform.
Amen. This is exciting stuff. I love that you obviously you get that, but a lot of people don't realize, and they have this insecurity. Like I remember, I was in banking for 20 years, and we would have a surgeon come in and be asking us questions, and some of my employees would be intimidated. I'm like, they know nothing about banking, believe me. And doctors with these incredibly high IQs, a lot of them were pretty ignorant when it came to basic banking function. And so if it's like one of those things where it's like you bring something to the table that they need, right? And we have to be able to see that worth in ourselves.
Yeah, I actually said that in that address. I'm like, "Hey, don't hand me a microscope. I don't know anything about it.
Exactly.
I can't do the science, okay? But if you know the person that can do the science, you need to lead them, okay?
Yes.
And as a CEO. So know your strengths, okay?
Beautiful.
I'm not a scientist. I'm not a pharmacist, any of that stuff. But,
Beautiful.
If you try hard enough, you can get people to do what you need them to do.
Absolutely. Ron put this together. Ron likes getting on borderline classified information. So, so without revealing anything classified and getting yourself in trouble, have you personally led or helped plan missions that required a similar level of coordination, like risk management or political sensitivity?
Absolutely. And I won't trip into the marginally classified stuff. I'm kind of stump broke on that. I know the pitfalls.
Yeah.
I'll focus on, so the bigger ones that I planned and executed in Africa would have been, the biggest one was Benghazi. Okay. And our response to Benghazi was big, and it had to happen fast because we had an ambassador who was captured and eventually killed. But the coordination between almost every agency that I just listed in those 25 agencies, to include obviously CIA I'll give you a tip. Watch the movie 13 Hours.
Okay.
And then have a good belly laugh, and I'll tell you what actually happened.
Nice.
Okay. Some of that happened, but
Yeah.
it was Hollywood.
Like a temp.
But my point is it starts with, here's how it started. Here's how Benghazi came to be. We started a continent-wide exercise that day. And I, as the J-33, one of the sections I own is called the JOC, the Joint Operations Center. And that is right out of central casting, right? It's all the screens on the wall and all the people at the desks and all that stuff. But I was in my office, and we were doing an exercise. And the JOC team chief, a Coast Guard commander, called me, and he said, "Sir, the U.S. consulate in Benghazi is under attack." And I actually said, "Wow, that's a really good measle," which a measle is an exercise inject. Right?
Okay.
And he's like, "Yeah, no, sir, this is not an exercise. This is actually happening." I'm like, "You've got to be kidding me." So I ran upstairs to the JOC, and I go into my little cockpit of nothing but communication devices. And I got the senior defense official, defense attaché, and the embassy in Libya on the phone, in Tripoli. And I said, "What's going on?" He's like, "We don't know. They're in Benghazi, but we know that the ambassador's missing. Okay, and they're under attack." And I was like, "Yeah, okay, that's fun to solve." And we had no resources really except for one MQ-9 Reaper. It's a drone that was flying from Sigonella, Italy toward Tripoli for surveillance. Wow. And I turned it, and I said, "Turn it right now, send to Benghazi." So that's my only resource that I had. Right?
Wow.
And then I got a call on one of my comm devices, and it was the vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, right, Admiral Winnefeld. And he's like, "What do you need?" And I said, "I pretty much need everything, Admiral, right? Like I need the C-17s that are here in Germany to turn south instead of east toward CENTCOM. I need a ship or ships to start moving, but the closest ship to us would have taken a minimum of 24 days to get there. And we didn't have that kind of time." And I said, "The ambassador's missing." And that's when it dove into the realm of very classified stuff on the resources that we needed in order to get after that. We put forces in Algeria. So Benghazi happened, yes, but at the same time, and you kind of got to tip your cap to the enemy on this one, at the same time that happened, they attacked the U.S. Embassy in Algeria, the U.S. Embassy in Tripoli, the U.S. Embassy in Egypt, Yemen, at the same time. So when you're standing there trying to figure this thing out, you're like, okay, which one's the real attack?
Yeah.
Right? And later on in debriefs, it was like, "Well, why didn't you react faster?" And we're like, "Well, we reacted as fast as we could, but what happened was you had a fire in Los Angeles and you called the New York Police Department."
I see.
Right?
Yeah.
Because there's just nobody in Africa. Right? The closest forces were in Djibouti, and Djibouti it's hours of flight away from. So anyway, and I won't go into too much, Ryan. So the bottom line is it's insanely complex because you have all of these agencies, and you have to have someone in charge, right? And in this case, it was the combatant commander for AFRICOM, and then he would turn to me and say, "Hey, call all of the other combatant commands and tell them we need their stuff." Okay, and so that was my job, was to go get resources and then direct the component commanders, the Navy, Air Force, Marines, Army, because they actually own the forces, direct them on what to do.
Wow.
Who to move where and when and how. So it's extraordinarily complex. I think I gave a brief to the leadership at some point, and one of them said, "How long have you been awake, CJ?" I didn't really know, and so I did a little math, and I'm like, 70 hours?
Oh my gosh.
And the Admiral, who's a really good guy, he said, "You know how I know that?" I said, "No." He's like, "Because you sound as drunk as somebody can sound. You didn't make any sense in that whole sentence." He's like, "Just go take a shower and get a nap." So,
oh my goodness.
But in 70 hours, you never sit down. You're just constantly moving because there's all of the moving pieces across the board that have to be coordinated. Not to mention, the one I left out, okay, and I'll stay with Benghazi again. Do you know, so we did have aircraft in Aviano, Italy, up north, okay? We had F-16s, okay? But in 98, 98. I might be wrong on that. I think it was 98. We had some foolish aviators they had this thing called the Underwire Club, right? And the gondola wire that carries gondolas across a valley, they would fly under the wire and they'd be in the club. Well, these foolish aviators, if you remember, they clipped the wire, right? And I think it was 30. The gondola fell to the valley floor and killed everybody in the gondola. Right?
Oh, jeez.
Do you know who remembers that? Italy remembers.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine.
So in order for us to take off from Aviano, Italy, and fly to Sigonella, okay, and then from there to Libya, we had to have diplomatic clearance, from the Italian government, or we weren't allowed, because they care that we were going to take off, bomb a sovereign nation, and then come back to their country, right? People don't see that side of it.
Not at
I've
all.
got the Department of State and the ambassador sitting right next to me saying, call them right now and tell them we need this. And Italy was like, yeah, we're not in any hurry. Not to mention, to make it even worse, France won't allow us to fly over their country, so we had to fly around the Iberian Peninsula and through the Straits of Gibraltar to get to Sigonella, because the aircraft, yes, they're sitting in Aviano, Italy, okay, but all the bombs and gas that go on them are in Mildenhall, England, because Italy won't allow us to have bombs and gas and planes in the same place in Italy because of that incident.
Oh, wow.
And so, the earliest, and I mean, it would have taken 7 consecutive miracles, earliest we could have responded with fixed-wing aircraft down to Benghazi would have been 26 hours. And that's literally with 7. That's with President Obama calling the president of Italy and saying, please.
So, Colonel, if I could interject.
Sir.
Of course, I watched the Secretary of State at the time, Hillary Clinton. I watched the hearings. Ambassador Chris Stevens, we saw his body being drugged through Benghazi. And as you know, that whole operation has a negative light from the news, and you've explained several things, but why was the embassy so poorly guarded? Could you clarify that?
Yes, I can. And I don't want to speak ill of somebody who's gone, okay? But there was a team, a special operations team, at the embassy. And Chris Stevens owns this, okay? He does. You have to pin the rose on him. He sent half of, it's called an ODA, an Operational Detachment Team Alpha, or A team, that was down there. And he sent half of it back to Stuttgart, which is where our headquarters was, Germany. And the combatant commander at the time asked him to come up, the ambassador. Now, a 4-star can't tell an ambassador what to do. They're the same rank, okay? He can only try to convince him. So Chris Stevens came up, Ambassador Stevens came up to Stuttgart, and he said, hey, please take this team back, okay? And he said, no, as a matter of fact, I'm sending the rest of them back too. And then he traveled to Benghazi. There was some false hope there, okay? And that was, so Chris Stevens, there's two sides of the coin. Yes, you have these transnational fundamentalist Islamic terrorists, but you also have the people of Libya, and they love Chris Stevens. He's their George Washington, because he was the kingpin on ousting Gaddafi.
Oh, wow.
So I know you're getting a theme here. Just the geopolitical things that go into the actual operation are significant. And so he sent the ODA back. He had DSS, Department of State Security, which unfortunately in the movie they made look like fools, and they are not. DSS is an exceptional group of people that they provide security to diplomatic missions, and they're really good.
What movie is it? Is it the 13 Hours?
It is.
Oh, okay.
They made them look like fools.
I'll have
and
to
that's
go back
just
and
not
watch.
true.
Yeah,
Really.
that's frustrating.
And so he went to Benghazi with a communications director and a couple DSS agents. And so he made a choice to do that, because he went for a run, if you don't know. He went for a run that morning in Benghazi with no security. He's just wearing his running suit stuff. And he waves to the people because he speaks the language. They waved to him. They loved him. Right? And these guys used the terrorists, used that to their advantage, right? Because Chris Stevens is like, no, they love me. Why do I need security, right? And we're like, you do. And he just made a choice. When you're fighting an insurgency, there's 2 rules, okay? There's really 2 schools of thought.
Yeah.
Put armor on the vehicles or take armor off the vehicles, right? Like, do I connect with the people, take armor off the vehicle, or do I protect myself from the people, put armor on the vehicles, right?
Yeah.
And he was very much a take armor off the vehicle type of guy, which is not a flawed concept, but in this case, Intel pointed to probably a different course of action.
Yeah, that is incredibly interesting.
Yeah, it is.
If that answers your question, I'm not 100% sure, but I just kind of took off.
Of course, you and I've talked before, but I'd never heard that. And the persona and the information we got is it was a debacle, and it's way more complex than that, as you said. And I'm glad you clarified that. Kristin, you go ahead.
If I can make just one last point on that.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. A commander or a leader can delegate authority, but cannot delegate responsibility. It's two completely different things. I can give you, Ron, Kristin, I can give you any authority that I have to transfer, but I'm never not responsible. Okay?
Right.
And the challenge is, to go back to the Hillary Clinton comment, Ron, and again, I'm not speaking ill of anybody, this is not a political statement. My point is, I believe that she was under the impression that when she delegated the authority to Chris Stevens, she also delegated responsibility. She didn't.
Yeah.
She was responsible.
Yeah, that is huge. And again, that's something that scales into even office leadership, right? Like
Totally.
Like we talked about before. So I think this question, we have a question here for you, and I think this is a perfect segue. So at this level of leadership, at your level of leadership mistakes don't just cost careers. We've seen that, right? Probably not enough. I don't think we have enough accountability in today's day and age, outside of the military, I should say. But it can cost lives or destabilize regions. And I'm talking about your prior world, right? How does that reality shape the mindset of commanders who are tasked with missions like this?
That's a great question. It really is. Okay? One of the bedrock principles of leadership is trust, right? And that is, I'm happy to say I relieved very few people of their jobs over my career, very few. But when I did, it was because I didn't trust them anymore, and I didn't trust that they could execute a mission if it was given to us. And so, because I would watch their units, okay? And if they couldn't perform, the leader's responsible, okay? Right. If you're a company commander, don't blame a platoon for the mistake, right? Because I'm coming at you, company commander, okay? And if you have built your career on that mindset, and it's not the only mindset, I'm not omniscient, okay? I got it. But my point is, if you give your units, and once again, it transitions into CEO, government, doesn't matter, right? But if you give your people the resources they need to execute the mission, and they sweat in training so they don't bleed in combat, then you can start to trust them with different missions, okay? The unfortunate part, and I'm kind of circling back around here, is I've seen it multiple times, and I've seen it done incredibly well multiple times. I've seen it more done well than not. But when you have that admiral asking me, how long are they going to be taking a break for the head? We had a C-130 flying around Egypt that was full of Marines, right? Fast Company, it's called, and we were trying to go south, and we were told if they go south, this is a different op, this was South Sudan, Juba. And we were told if they fly over the Sudan border, which is north of South Sudan, obviously, that they'll be shot down. So they were on the plane so long they had to stop and take a restroom break, if you will, the head, right?
Oh, okay, I thought I was going to say, do you mean like a bathroom break? But then I didn't want to be immature.
It's a habit. I can't break that habit. It's a head. Right?
Okay, good. That's what I was thinking.
Army would say latrine, Air Force would say powder room.
How fun.
I'm kidding. Any airman listening to this, I love
powder
you.
Room, that's hilarious.
And our next guest is going to be an Air Force, never mind.
Oh, yeah, and they'd accuse me of eating crayons. I'm good with it. It's fine.
That's funny.
But they did have to take a break, and the 3-star was on me. Like, how long are they going to be on the ground? I'm like, what are you going to do with that information, sir? Like, are you going to do anything with that C-130? Right? Like, why do you want to know why a platoon on the ground in Egypt is using the head and how long they're going to be? Okay? You're an operational leader, not a tactical leader. Okay? So go back to your desk.
Oh, good for you.
But, he would get the hint.
Yeah.
I'm not calling the Air Force and asking them that question. And so as a leader, you need to be cognizant of that. Right? And ask yourself, every time you ask a question, here's the thing about leadership. What interests the leader fascinates the led. Right? Like if I'm just musing about something and I'm in charge, be careful of that. Because it will fascinate those that you lead, and they will waste thousands of hours trying to answer a question that you really didn't mean to ask, and you're not going to do anything with anyway.
Okay.
You need to be cognizant of that at all times. Okay? I have
That's
a really
very
quick vignette on
interesting,
that,
actually.
if I can just, a little liberty. I know your time, but when I was a captain, I was an aide. A general rates an aide de camp, right? Wear a little rope, manage the schedule, get them point A, point B. I love my boss. He was amazing. But the chief of staff, I loved as well, he wanted to know everything the general said, right? When he was alone with me. And so I went into his office, or the general asked me what I thought of something that he said. And I said, sir, I think that's the nice pen theory. He's like, what's the nice pen theory? I said, all right, sir, I walk into your office with some innocuous piece of paperwork that needs your signature, an award or something. And you don't have a pen, so I give you my pen, you sign it, and you look at it and you say, hey, that's a nice pen. You give it back to me. Now I'm going to walk outside the chief, and the chief of staff's going to stop me and say, what did the general say? And I'm going to say, he said nice pen, sir. And I go back to my desk. And the chief of staff walks across the hall to the director of operations and the director of logistics. And for the ops guy, he says, hey, I want a policy that says all official correspondence will be signed with this pen. And for the logistics guy, buy 10,000 pallets of these pens and distribute them to the force. Okay? Right? So now we're doing that. And then 4 or 5 months later, I'm working on a relief for cause package because somebody got fired. And the general says, well, why did he get fired? And I say, because he wasn't signing official correspondence with the pen. What pen? The nice pen, sir. Be careful what you say.
That's
Oh,
good.
wow. Yeah, that's amazing.
So you need to be cognizant when you're in charge that you ask the right questions and
Yes.
something that you can do with.
I've told
That's a
Kristin
good
this
one.
before, but when I first got promoted, I told one of the instructors, when you're finished with your class, come see me. So I set the phone down. I'm busy. I look down. I've got a paragraph. Did I do something wrong? What's this about? So I realized, I've got a new level of authority. So I didn't want to make people sweat. So I would say, hey, come and see me. I need to talk to you about the ballistic vest or the article, whatever it is.
Yes.
Those are learning, and that's really good stuff, CJ, about having a reason for asking questions, because I think a lot of leaders ask questions because they can. And it's kind of a way to show their authority. Why are you doing it that way? That's good
Right.
stuff.
Yeah. That's one of the only times I've actually heard it explained that way. So that was really an aha moment for me.
Yeah,
So
that was
thank you.
good.
I'm glad.
So let's go back to Venezuela for just a moment, and,
Sure.
and then we'll move on. So there's something in federal law enforcement and law enforcement in general, we call it policy paralysis. And we used to show a video where a deputy sheriff is shot and killed, but it just so happens this deputy sheriff had been warned about excessive force the month prior. And most people believe he hesitated too long to draw his weapon because he had been, reprimanded before, and we call that policy paralysis. So in a situation like this, the mission was to bring Maduro and his wife back alive. And as we talked about, there's always moving parts and things can change. How much pressure is it as far as the mission, or would they have had flexibility? Now, I know if Maduro was shooting at them, that's different, but do you think there's an opportunity for policy paralysis, or do you think in these situations they're given enough flexibility to respond to force as necessary? How does that work? And is policy paralysis a thing in the military?
Absolutely. It is. We call it paralysis by analysis. But
yeah,
it's the same
that's how I
thing.
know it too. Yeah.
Right? But it's a really prescient question because, again, cognizance as a leader, you need to provide that flexibility on the ground like we talked about. But what I do like and changed, I was in Somalia, don't go there. When I was a lieutenant.
Minnesota?
I was in Somalia.
Did you have a daycare?
I'm kidding.
No.
Don't let us drag you down.
That's fine. But,
I'll take you political
We will.
accidentally. So
if it was
just
on your
kidding.
list, take it off. But, and we had rules of engagement. You had a little card that they gave you, right? Rules of engagement written by some lawyers, very smart lawyers. And, if it's all if-then statements. If this happens, then you can do this, right? And I hated it. I just hated it.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody did, all up and down the chain of command. And it evolved, and I'm glad it did, because we can change. And it evolved over time. And the rules of engagement. So I was in Afghanistan 6 weeks after the towers fell. Right, we left on the 18th of September.
Wow.
Right, our unit via ship, and then went into Afghanistan. We got the rules of engagement, and the very first line in the rules of engagement says very clearly, "Nothing in these rules of engagement inhibits your inherent right of self-defense." Okay, so if someone is shooting at you, or if they point a weapon at you, right, that's hostile intent. Okay, and nothing restricts you from that. So let's say Maduro was armed, and he was shooting back. I got it. Our role is to capture him, but look, we saved a bunch of money, right, by ending that little fantasy of his. He didn't, but my point is, those soldiers, those Rangers in Delta, whom I just love, those guys, they're so professional and talented. They had the inherent right of self-defense on the ground. If anybody shot at them or made a hostile act or hostile intent, then they would have been clear. And that frees up a lot of headspace, right? Like General Mattis said, the most important 6 inches on the battlefield is the space between your ears. The ability to think.
Yeah.
So they are armed with the ability to think because that line is in the rules of engagement. Now, the emphasis from the commander, at whatever level, is going to be, hey, we really want to capture this guy. I got it, because it's political theater, right? To capture him and his wife, that's pure political theater, is what that is.
Right.
And it meets intent. I'm not poo-pooing political theater. What I'm saying is it was a show. But if you're going to put soldiers, Marines, airmen, I don't care, in harm's way, you have to arm them with the ability to defend themselves. Okay? They can't be sacrificial lambs. And that line clears it up. Does that answer that?
That's good to hear. Yes, absolutely.
I'm gonna give you kind of a jabroni question here, but I am curious. Okay, so that sweatsuit that Maduro is shown in, literally, I don't know if you guys know this, but it has sold out everywhere. That gray matching sweatsuit, which is so crazy. It just gives you an idea of what we're dealing with here, stateside.
So I
mentality.
actually teach. I teach here at Citadel, but I don't teach cadets. I teach veterans around the state. And part of one of the courses that I teach is the different influences on marketing, right? What are the market forces? And one of them is psychographics. Right? I mean, certainly you look at density, population, race, gender, all that stuff, but also psychographics. That's a psychographic. It became popular, that sweatsuit, because it was on whatever news outlet you watch.
Right.
And Maduro was in it. And so it became in the mind. How many of you have a pet rock?
Yeah, I do not.
Yeah, remember the pet rock? Oh, the biggest thing in the world. Right? And that's a total psychographic right there.
That's so, okay, so who brings them? Because I highly doubt that's what he was wearing when they went in. I mean, maybe it was, but I am curious, like the level of detail. What if he was just sleeping in his underwear? Like, does the U.S. military come in with something to change them into? Because that's what the world is going to see.
Okay. I probably can't explain what a great question that is, how great a question that is. And I think it goes to some of the other questions you all have asked, and that is, what is the level of complexity of planning that goes into this, right? That's the level of complexity. What's he wearing? What's his wife wearing?
Yeah.
Right? Is she in a nightgown? Right? She's not been, at least I haven't seen her on any of the news outlets, but, what are they doing? Have they been drinking? Right? You never
right.
know what's going on. Are they both in the same room? Important. Right? When you look at the level of intelligence it takes to pull this off, I'll give you an example, and I know they're huge, but just the J2, that's the intelligence section, just the J2 at Africa Command had 1,100 people in it.
Wow.
That's how many people are looking at that problem and trying to use all the resources that we have, and there's many, to find out those kinds of questions. What are they wearing? What does he sleep in normally?
Yeah.
Maybe we should take a sweatsuit with us. Now, I'm not saying that happened. He might have been wearing that. I don't know. But that is the level of detail that they will have to that.
And I think it's smart because the emotional piece, right? Because then if he's shown half naked, and that's what we see, then we don't look great, right, on the world stage. Also, if she's, maybe she's wearing a nightgown and maybe it has a cleavage aspect to it, then that's inappropriate as well, right?
Totally.
All of that, it is wild, all that goes into it. And we've seen about 4 different outfit changes for the public pictures that have been taken, right? So it's really interesting because there has to be a mindfulness that's going into that, understanding that this is going to be seen by the world.
Yeah. And Kristin, if I could interject, I happened to see an interview with someone. The light blue sweatsuit or whatever they put on him at night is, they interviewed someone, it's American-made sweatsuit, and they believed it was one of the soldiers had it, but they wanted him to show up because it was too dark. And they did want him to show up walking from, the chopper or whichever one that it was, I don't remember. But I don't know that was specifically planned, but they were interviewing the someone from Nike that actually designed that or made it or something, and he said we looked up and there he was in our attire. So I don't have all the details straight, but I do know that they put the bright color on so that he would show up. And the colonel mentioned a lot of political theater, and you're right, Kristin. It would have looked really bad on us had we humiliated him and his wife, because even in our searches in law enforcement, there's been some really disturbing things that have happened, and it doesn't make us look good. So, Kristin, why don't we move down to, for time's sake, let you take the next one.
Okay. All right. So Maduro's situation also highlights how leaders can become insulated by power. I think that's a really important topic that I don't hear discussed often enough. And so from a military leadership perspective, how dangerous is isolation at the top?
First off, it's the responsibility of the leader, to not be insulated. Right? There's a couple of quips I'll give you. I actually use these with the Morgan Stanley folks. One, don't surround yourself with people who laugh a little too hard at your jokes, because you're probably not that fun. You're not that fun. Okay.
Yep.
Your spouse comes in really handy in that situation. My wife doesn't think I'm funny at all. She'll just tell me exactly what she thinks. Right. So, be mindful of when somebody's just laughing a little too hard at your jokes. Okay? The second one is, so the best compliment I ever got when I was on active duty, and they didn't mean it as a compliment, but I took it as one, was people would say, "Sir, you are never in your office when I come by." That's the best compliment you could give me.
Yes.
I don't want to be in my office. Leadership doesn't happen in my office. Okay. Yes. The phrase I like to use is, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. Okay? So get out of your office. Go walk around. Ask someone how their kid's soccer game was last Saturday, or whatever, you know them well enough, right? And that's how so and this is not unique to me in any way, but I would give an order as a platoon commander or as a company commander or at any level, and battalion, regiment, I would issue an order, and if it was a tactical order, I stole this right out of Napoleon's repertoire, if you will. It's called Napoleon's Corporal, actually. And then I would find one of the junior people that were at the order, and I'd walk up to him and say, "So what are we doing?" Right? Were you listening? Right? What does Green Star Cluster mean? Well, it means ceasefire. Good. I'm glad you pay attention to that, because I don't want to run into your fire because you didn't listen to what a Green Star cluster means.
Right.
That is really important. And I use the word cognizant a lot. I just mean aware of when you're too insulated from what's going on. And that means, like when my general, when I was an aide, he was responsible for all of Marine Corps recruiting. So he had recruiters in Asia, in Japan, in Hawaii, all 48 contiguous states, Alaska, and Europe, and the Caribbean. Okay, that's a really big job.
Yeah.
We traveled a minimum of 17 days a month. I've been to every recruiting station in the Marine Corps multiple times. And he taught me that, because he was so aware that if he stayed at headquarters Marine Corps in Washington, D.C., he wasn't going to hear what he needed to hear. And when we went places, this is why I really liked him, because when we would go places, he would always address all the recruiters and everybody, as you do, give a little talk. But my job, while he was talking, was to go around the building and talk to Marines. Hey, what's going on here? What do you think?
Yes.
What's your morale level like? And don't lie to me, okay? I don't make enough money for you to lie to me. Tell me what you're thinking. And then he and I on the plane back would have a very candid conversation, right? About, hey, sir, I'm just telling you. Marines aren't buying it. Or the Marines are all bought in, sir. They love this place, right? They're doing great. You have to have that ground reconnaissance, if you will.
Yeah.
And put somebody that can do that. And I don't care what level you are. CEO, President of the United States, Governor, 4-star. I don't care what level it is. It applies.
Right.
To everything. Go walk through the barracks. See what they're talking about.
Yes.
Right? So, if that helps.
Oh, that's huge.
CJ, I've been saying Colonel. We know each other, so we've never mentioned that. So I've got a kind of off the wall question here, and I'm not trying to be political, but how important is it the POTUS, President of the United States, to the troops, to the military, or does it even matter who's elected?
It matters immensely.
I was wondering that earlier, actually, so I'm glad you're asking this.
You're welcome, Kristin. I'm here for you.
I was like, I'm trying not to, I'm holding back. But yeah, good. It's a great question.
I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus here.
Do it.
It matters who the president is, because the president picks the people around him. And those are the people that are going to interact at the combatant command level, at the joint staff level, at the DOD level, right? Specifically the National Security Council. Right, the National Security Council is made up of whomever the president wants it to be made up of, but it's generally all the secretaries in the cabinet, and led by the National Security Advisor. But what you don't see is right next door to the White House is the Eisenhower Executive Building, right? What used to be called, that was the original War Department. That was the original Pentagon before they built the Pentagon, and then it was the Executive Office Building. Now it's the Eisenhower Building. That building's big, and it's full with all kinds of people who love to call and ask questions that they can't do anything with. Right?
Oh, okay.
If the president,
that's frustrating.
It is. I call it a time sponge. They are just a time sponge. Now every now and then they call and I'm like, hey, that's a great question. I'll make you change.
Yeah.
But everybody in that building wants to be in the building next door. How do you do that? You create ways to invent information, right? So you start bothering people who are in combatant commands or at the service headquarters in the Pentagon or whatever it is, and you call up and they ask questions, like, hey, how high is up and where do babies come from? And there's like, what are you going to do with that information other than take my time?
Right.
That's why the president's important, because if he does it right, if he has a good national security advisor, if he has a good Secretary of Labor, whatever, I don't care what department it is. You pick the right person who can lead that department, you will save thousands of hours of wasted time doing stuff that doesn't matter. Okay, right. So it's really important to have somebody who can cut through a lot of that. And, I'm again, not a political statement, the whole Doge thing that went down. I worked at the Pentagon 5 times, okay? And I would say I'd get home and occasionally be frustrated. It was good work, but I tell Linda, I'm like, I could back up 50 commercial buses to the Pentagon and put every third person in the Pentagon in a commercial bus and drive them away, and we wouldn't miss a step.
Oh, wow.
We wouldn't miss a step, right? We'd be actually so much better if we could just get rid of that person, right?
Yeah.
And I would ask people, what do you do, right, when they're on their fifth smoke break in the courtyard of the Pentagon, right? So I agreed with what Doge was trying to do, the intent of Doge. I didn't, just editorial comment, I didn't care for the technique in which they did it. It could have been handled a lot better. But I agreed with it, right? And that comes from the senior leadership in the country. Hey, clean this out, right? Get rid of waste. And so I think it's really important, Ron.
I saw this in Homeland Security. People would literally get reprimanded and moved. They call it the corner office. These would be GS-15s, which is about 145 grand, and doing almost nothing. And that part kind of sickened me. And that was a theme. I saw that more than once from working in D.C. and down in Georgia, the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. I was astounded. I would be like, what does that person do? They're not really anything, instead of letting them go. So, man, I feel your pain.
And that stuff ticks me off, because someone that came from the private sector where all we saw was staff reduction, constantly it's the waste that I hear, and I learn more and more from Ron. Just the waste that occurs with tax dollars just really irks me, especially being in leadership where someone was constantly, we never had an influx of FTO or money, or it was incredibly, so I don't know. I guess it's really, so I want to know though, because you mentioned something, so Doge, and there was a lot of political theater there too as well. I would say everyone could probably see that. And I know it's a heavy detail, right? But what would you have changed, just high level? What did you not appreciate?
The sense of urgency.
Okay.
I mean, I get it. It has to happen. It does. The intent, again, I'm in. But these are people, okay? And there's a level of dignity, depending on their performance or whatever it is, that I feel like people deserve, if they earn it from me, right? I didn't really get the urgency where we're like tonight we're gonna cut 80,000 jobs out of the VA.
So you're talking about the layoffs or the job cuts?
Let's have a look at that first, right? Like, what does that actually look like? Here's another thing, messaging, right? It wasn't messaged well, okay? Do I think you could get rid of 80,000 people in the VA? Yeah. Okay, because my medical's taken care of by the VA, and it's wonderful, to be honest with you. I love the Ralph H. Johnson VA here in Charleston, but is there fat there? Yeah, absolutely. Okay, but let's look at what it is. Treat people with dignity, and let them know, hey, I'm about to hit you in the face with a baseball bat. Hey, that's going to happen, right? Before you just hit him with a baseball bat. Oh, God, I hope I don't get banned from Instagram for that kind of thing.
There's some major irony here, CJ, but one of my good friends that Kristin has actually met led the Doge audit on the VA. We won't go into that. Also, another, as the lieutenant colonel in the Marine Corps, was working at USAID, and he said the same thing as you. He got the overall theme, but he said that these were individuals who came in and worked hard every day, and there were some messaging issues. So he said basically the same thing that you did. So, hey, Kristin, I guess we're going to have to wind down. I also have another appointment coming up. CJ, we want to ask you a very important question, and it might be simple, it might be a little more complex, but if you were briefing young officers, or let's say executives, because as you said, leadership translates, and I've found that in my world as well. Yeah. If you were briefing them, what would you say, number one, what piece of advice would you give them? And if they were asking you about the Venezuelan capture, what would be the biggest takeaway of an operation like that? So it's a two-part question, general advice and what's the most important component of that operation that we're talking about.
I'll flip the script. I'll do the second question
Okay.
first. And that is, everybody knows the answer to this, but how do you eat an elephant, right? One bite at a time. Don't try to eat the elephant, okay? Know your role, execute your role, supervise those that are executing it, and influence the leadership who's driving it. Okay, leading up. Good book, by the way. You need to be able to influence those people who are making the final decisions. Okay, and you do that by being professional and knowledgeable and all of the ables that you're supposed to be. But in the end, know your role. Okay, if you're a battalion commander, that's a lieutenant colonel. Okay, you are not going to change the regiment, right? Which is the next level higher. You can, when asked your opinion, you can present it professionally and with some level of knowledge, but you're actually not going to change it until you're a regimental commander. But if you focus your energies where they should be, you can make your battalion a better place to be. So if you're sitting at your desk worrying about what regiment's doing, stop doing that. Okay? If you're an individual pilot who's flying a tanker over the Caribbean who's going to refuel aircraft that need to get there, worry about keeping your plane in the air. Okay? Don't worry about what Stratcom and Spacecom and what they're doing. Okay? Focus. Know your role. And that's how you eat that elephant. Okay? That's how you are an effective member of the force.
Love it.
The advice I would give you is 100% plagiarized, because it was given to me by maybe the greatest leader I ever saw. His name is General Joseph Dunford, Fighting Joe. If you remember him, he was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff during President Trump's first administration. And he was, before that, the Commandant of the Marine Corps. He's a retired 4-star now. And he was just, he wouldn't even have to open his mouth. And if he told me to go lay down on I-26, I would just go. I wouldn't even ask why, okay? Because he must have a reason.
Wow.
But he told me once, he said, whenever there's a problem in one of my units, I look in ever-growing concentric rings around my own desk for the problem. That's leadership. Start with me.
Wow.
Did I cause this? And multiple, I never wrote that down, by the way. I just memorized it immediately, and I use it 10 times a day. Still, even in this capacity. I would ask, and my sergeant majors would lose their mind a lot of times, because they'd say, hey, we need to burn this kid or burn this man. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. And why not? I'm like, because through some act of omission or commission or a policy that I either didn't write or enforce, I caused that to happen. Okay? Now, the simple ones are DUIs and adultery, okay? I'm burning. Okay, because that ain't my fault, okay? How many times you got to be told?
Yeah.
But, if something happens, you need to be introspective about it and look in ever-growing concentric rings around your own desk for the problem. And if it's you, do something about it.
Right. Wow. Yeah, that's huge. I don't think enough people look inward. And that's an understatement. So I really appreciate you pointing that out. I want to ask you, after decades of command, how do you personally define true leadership when power, title, and authority are stripped away? And it could be stripped away through retirement. It could be, right, job change. But when you no longer have those things, how do you define true leadership?
Well, understand your positional authority, and most definitely don't overstep that bound. Can I give you an anecdote to that? Because I used to teach this to my young officers.
Yeah.
When I was a company commander, that's about 180 Marines. You have 5 lieutenants, right? And they're your platoon commanders and your XO. And I was getting these lieutenants that showed up when they would rotate, and we'd go to the field, and I noticed that they were taking their rank off of their uniform. And I'm inquisitive, right? So I'm like, hey, Tad, one of my guys, great guy, why you take your rank off? Oh, well, at IOC, Infantry Officers Course, or Idiots Out Camping, they told us we should take the rank off because the enemy sniper will see our rank and take us out first, right? And I said, okay, let me just take a minute to explain how stupid what you just said is. Okay? If you're doing your job, they know who you are anyway, regardless of what you're wearing. Okay? If you are out and about and moving and talking and communicating and directing, that must be the guy.
Right.
Okay? But if you're just sitting in a fighting position and not doing anything, yeah, I might overlook you. Okay? But I'm going to see the antenna coming out of your hole and I'm doing it anyway. But my point is, another very quick one. I was, one of my last jobs, I was the director of the College of Enlisted Military Education for the Marine Corps. That's all enlisted education around the world at 9 academies, right?
Wow.
I love that job. And I would go to the academies every 6 weeks. I'd go from D.C. to Tokyo to Okinawa to Hawaii to San Diego, 29 Palms, Camp Lejeune, and back to D.C. every 6 weeks. Because if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, right?
Yeah.
And when I was there, I would address all the students. And usually, give or take 350 students at any given time of different ranks, all enlisted, okay? And when I would stand up there, as a colonel, whatever, I would say, how many officers are in this room? And they would say, 1. Routinely. Like, you're wrong. There's 351 officers in this room. You are a non-commissioned officer, okay? Which means officer, okay? What separates you from me is a little bit of law in Title 10 of the U.S. Code. That's it, okay? It's a little bit of law. The definition of an officer is someone who is allowed to represent an organization officially. That's it. It's an elegant definition, okay?
Yeah.
And you have every ability to end up on the cover of Navy Times as I do for doing something stupid, okay? So understand that. It doesn't matter what's on your collar. They're going to do what you say. They get it. You're a sergeant. He's a corporal. He's going to do what you say. But mind how you say it,
Right.
okay?
Right.
And understand that you are a leader and you have to be able to enforce that regardless of whether you're in PT gear, physical training gear, or a dress uniform. It doesn't matter what's up there.
Right.
If you're doing your job, they're going to do what you say. They know you're in charge. You don't have to walk up to people and go, look, I'm this. I don't care what you are. How effective are you is what matters to me. Does that answer that?
Oh,
It
yeah.
does.
And then some. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
When you said PT gear, I thought of those little Black Ranger shorts.
That's essentially
You
what
could
it
be
is.
in those. Yeah.
So, Colonel
Ours are green, but yeah.
Nice.
Colonel Williams, we are going to have to wind down. This has been phenomenal. Number one,
could go for hours.
thank you for your service to our country, and
Yes.
thank you for letting us look behind the veil of not only this latest mission in Venezuela, but I think so many people, they see talking heads on the news and they don't get to hear some of the behind the scenes information. But also you provided some great leadership information that any company could have takeaways from this episode. So this has really been tremendous.
Yeah.
Well, tell them I'm happy to come and talk to them, their companies, because it does translate very, very well. I'm more than happy to come and talk to them because we do it quite a bit. But thank you, Ron, for your service, first off.
I appreciate that.
Being a law enforcement officer, I appreciate that. Well, you guys don't get thanked enough. You don't. And here's why I say that. Because, I went to combat 5-6 times, and that's great, but over 32 years. Our law enforcement officers, our first responders, they're in the fight every single day.
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't think you guys get 10% off at Lowe's enough either.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
Kristin, final word?
Oh, well, this conversation has been a real reminder that leadership, it's not about holding power, it's about being worthy of it. And this conversation, you really drove that home. So I want to thank you for that.
Yeah.
Thank you, that really means a lot. And I couldn't have summed it up any better than that. You are 100% spot on.
All right, everyone. Semper Fi. Be the leader you're meant to be.
The Dirty Side of Leadership podcast is brought to you by Forward Operations. If you'd like to book Ron or Kristin for speaking events, training, or executive coaching, visit forwardoperations.com. Be the leader you're meant to be.